Dun, 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 dun. Welcome to Medical Spa Insider. This is Compliance is Cool edition. Alex Thiersch coming to you from the virtual AmSpa studio. And I am very, very happy and pleased to be joined by my two partners in crime, Jeff Segal. Jeff, where are you? In North Carolina right now? Or are you on the
I am in North Carolina.
Jeff's in
and
North
right
Carolina.
now.
And right now,
Yep.
Jeff is with ByrdAdatto, also is the founder of Medical Justice, does a lot with physicians, helping them with their reputation and get out of situations. I wouldn't say like the one that we're going to be talking about, but certainly ones that have issues with reputational harm and sometimes criminal liability. ByrdAdatto, all of you know him. He's the one of the partners at ByrdAdatto and is very, very highly involved in regulatory work and disciplinary actions before the Texas Medical Board and other boards around the country. We are talking today about the criminal murder and manslaughter charges filed in Texas against both the med spa owner as well as the medical director involved in the Jennifer Cleveland death that occurred, I want to say, it's been a couple of years now, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago when that accident occurred. And I say accidents, I think that's kind of an operative, important word given the charges that were filed. This has obviously been a very big deal for all of us in this industry, in the medical spa industry, in light of what happened. For those of you who don't know, if you're hearing this for the first time, there's lots of information on the AmSpa website. There's lots of information on the internet about what happened. But long story short, it's a very tragic, unfortunate story. A woman went in for an IV treatment in a medical spa, was provided IV and some drugs that were in the IV that caused her heart to stop. They did not have any ability to resuscitate her, and she ended up dying. And come to learn that there was really no medical training on site. I don't really know the entire circumstances, but I don't believe there was any type of a good faith exam. There certainly was no physician or RN on site. The person who administered the treatment didn't have any real medical training from what we're hearing. There was no protocols to help obviously deal with a situation like this, not to mention medical history, all sorts of standard of care issues. Very, very bad situation. We had been dealing with this for a couple of years, and certainly I thought there would be some issues and some discipline with respect to the physician in light of what happened, who was a medical director and was was in the state, but was far away. And from what we've seen, hadn't had a whole lot of interaction with the medical spa, certainly wasn't on site, hadn't been there very often. Don't know that for certain, so I don't want to make any speculation. I have not seen the actual charging documents yet either. But nothing really happened for a good year and a half. From what I recall, the physician was suspended for a hot minute, but from what then I heard was reinstated.
And Alex, if you let me, I'll jump in real quick. He was suspended, and his license does have a limited suspension on it, meaning that they said, as a physician, he's an anesthesiologist by trade, he can no longer supervise any other staff members.
Okay.
Which is what the allegations was, that he was supervising someone who was not, under proper supervision delegation. So They allowed him to continue to provide his anesthesia services, but he was limited. He couldn't supervise or delegate to any other medical providers.
And that was a result of this incident, right? That was
correct.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And that was back in 2023, I believe.
Right, gotcha. So that was kind of the state of things. And then limited suspension, and then out of the blue last week we hear about these criminal charges, and a couple things that I'll just comment on, and then I'd love to hear from you all, both of you, about this. For me, number one, I wasn't necessarily surprised to hear that there were criminal charges filed, because this has been a very big deal in Texas. The legislature was involved. There was a lot of media attention. There seemed to be a push, a very public push to have something done. The legislature that AmSpa was down kind of helping with, the bill that was filed did a little something. It wasn't necessarily that impactful. It was okay. I mean, I think it was a good bill, but it certainly wasn't, earth shattering. So to see criminal charges, I don't think was surprising. One thing that was surprising to me was a murder charge. I think that really kind of shook me a little bit, because murder to me, and it seems like you have to have some sort of intent. I don't know that for certain. I want to get your all thoughts on that. And we are trying to secure a criminal defense attorney to get on the podcast as well. The other thing that kind of surprised me was that, just to what you said a second ago, Brad, was that this is where we are. We have a criminal charge of manslaughter and murder against the owner and this physician. But really, other than the limited medical suspension, this physician is still practicing. There hasn't been a whole lot of medical board, involvement. Like where is the discipline? Where are the guardrails here? I guess is kind of where my question is like,
yeah, let me jump in here.
Yeah.
So let me jump in here, because in Texas,
ahead,
there is some precedent with Dr. Death, for example. He was a neurosurgeon working in Dallas, the Dallas area, and a lot of people had been injured under his care. And the board was aware of complaints, but I think he had adequate defense, and he was continuing to practice until ultimately the ante was raised with criminal charges. And it was a very novel use of the elder abuse law to prosecute and to convict and to put him in prison. Criminalization of medical care is unusual. It's high profile. It's newsworthy because it is rare, and a lot of it depends upon intent. I mean, for most of us who practice medicine, if there's a problem, it's usually due to an inadvertent, unintentional mistake. And the civil system generally disposes of that properly. If the practitioner is a danger to the public, the board may get involved, and it may be anything from any type of disciplinary action, from a reprimand to suspension to promotion to revocation, all of the above. But it's rare. Having said that, there have been some recent high-profile cases. There's one in particular. Wasn't a physician, it was a nurse at Vanderbilt who was trying to juggle a lot of knives at the same time. She was helping out. She was a floater and took a patient down for an imaging study. The patient was somewhat claustrophobic. I believe she intended to give Versed to sedate her, and punched in the first two letters to save some time into the Pyxis system, VE, makes sense, Versed, VE. And because vecuronium comes before Versed in the dictionary, the machine asked, "Do you want to give vecuronium?" And she wrote, "Yes." Now, vecuronium is a paralytic agent used in anesthesia in the ICU to keep people on a ventilator, keep them from fighting on the ventilator. So she got the vecuronium, gave it to the patient. Patient immediately stopped breathing, and I believe died. So this is clearly unintentional.
What was the charge in that case?
They charged her with negligent homicide. They said because she had the opportunity to not override. I mean, she could have overridden the system and said, "Oh, no, I don't mean vecuronium, I mean Versed." But apparently, this was a longstanding problem known to the institution, that it was a mistake waiting to happen, meaning others had gone through this before, and ultimately, an eager prosecutor took the case, and they won. Basically, they got a conviction. She appealed, and I believe it was sustained, but she didn't go to prison. It was for time served or whatnot. But this was very disheartening, because she was a good nurse who made a mistake. A good nurse who made a mistake, unintentional, and now she's got a stain on her criminal record. There's another case right now pending in Florida where murder charges were filed. This is a guy who had some prior issues in the past, probably not the finest surgeon on the planet, but he persuaded a patient who had imaging evidence of a large spleen to have his spleen removed. And this patient was in a small hospital in Florida, said, no, I'm just traveling. I want to go back to Alabama, to the big city. I'll get my care there. I said, well, look, let's just keep you here for a couple of days. We'll monitor you and make sure you don't deteriorate. He said, well, okay, I can live with that. And it turns out his hematocrit dipped a little bit, but nothing to write home about. So the patient is persuaded to have surgery. Surgeon gets into trouble, opens up the belly, and somehow mistakes the spleen for the liver for the spleen, and removes the liver. That to me is no pun intended, shocking. It is shocking. The patient went into shock and died. But he then submitted the path specimen as spleen. The path report comes back. No, this is liver. And ultimately, they suspend his privileges at the hospital. The board does a summary suspension, and now he is the man who mistook spleen for liver and
he was
has been
charged with
indicted for
murder,
manslaughter.
Jeff, in that case? Was that murder? Was
Yes,
that negligent
he was.
homicide? Or okay.
Yeah, and the argument being is that this wasn't his first rodeo. He had other issues in the past with making errors, and of course the hospital's on board too. Civilly, they'll be the deep pocket. But here, it's a type of mistake that just seems unfathomable. You just can't imagine how you can mistake one organ for another, and then you look back and it had several other mistakes like that, mistaking one organ for another. Yet there he was. So that's a criminal charge right now.
So, Brad, what do you think
Unusual,
about all this? I'm curious what your
unusual.
thoughts were when you saw this
Well,
charge come
first
in.
off, I'm definitely not getting surgery done anytime soon. So thanks, Jeff. That
Not
really
not in rural Florida.
really not in rural Florida. I guess first, coming back at this, we were talking about, I want to be real clear. Our firm, ByrdAdatto, we're business attorneys representing healthcare practices, and so everything I'm framing is coming, generally speaking, from a business attorney that does handle medical complaints. As you said earlier, we're not criminal counsel. I do know criminal counsel. I have worked at DA's office before, but my focus is really to where, Jeff and I think you guys are going, is how unusual this is. So in the grand scheme of things, extremely unusual to see something like this happening. Is the contains some of the greatest stories of all times and knows more things than I'll ever know in my lifetime, probably right now. But it's amazing to hear because I was thinking about this earlier. Alex, was remember when there were arrests, when there was some Botox stuff happening in Houston, what in the 2019, 2018, something like that, and so they were arresting people who were providing Botox without proper supervision, delegation, ownership. And that was all in Houston. And that kind of amped up a little bit of the industry just for those arrests, which I think most of them did eventually go away because the prosecutors didn't want to prosecute those arrests. But in this particular case, this is a little bit more serious because it's not some random police officer that was, posing as a patient to get Botox. This is a situation that typically, if someone's going this far down the road, there's a criminal complaint basically happening, meaning the DAs are sitting around trying to figure out what to do. And they believe there's enough evidence there to then arrest that individual. Now, I don't know because I have not seen the complaint either. Did they go in front of a grand jury? Did they indict these people for these criminal charges? So all these things are happening in the background prior typically to someone being arrested after the fact. So the ones in Texas that were happening was at the moment in time, the police officer arrested them because they believed they're breaking the law. This is well after the fact. I think it was in 2023, Alex, is when she passed away, Jennifer, you were referring to earlier. So this is 3 years later for them to sit there and investigate. Clearly, at least in the DA's mind, they have enough evidence to move forward. And you said something which is really important, which is this is not a civil suit. This is a criminal suit. And criminal means they have to have criminal intent to do whatever they're charged with. So there needs to be intent, meaning that they intended to do something. Or there's a negligence charge from manslaughter, which is like you didn't mean to, but you should have known better. And so those are the kind of things where once I think as a criminal complaint comes out, and I know that you have a criminal attorney that you're trying to get on, I'd love to hear his perspective from the criminal perspective. But I'm just looking at it from where we typically see these things, and this is extremely unusual.
Let's talk a little bit about the different levels of intent. So the worst is intent to kill murder, where somebody goes out, for example, buys a gun, and thinks about it and deliberates and ambushes someone and intends to kill them. That's intent to kill murder. Then below that may very well be, well, a willful blindness, a conscious disregard of a foreseeable and substantial risk, meaning that you were aware of cutting corners and said, just screw it. I know it's dangerous. What are the odds? It's unlikely to happen, and just
Even if it
consciously
is
ignore
likely
it.
to happen, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, screw
Yeah,
it.
I'm gonna do it anyway. So that's below intent to kill murder. And then you have negligent homicide where you didn't consciously disregard it, but your actions were such that you should have been aware of the potential problem. And they all carry different penalties, and the state or the federal government, well, typically the state, needs to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So they've got to have a lot of evidence to do it. The threshold for beyond a reasonable doubt is all it takes is a juror to say, you know what, I have doubt. And then that's the end of that case. They can bring it back, potentially as a mistrial. But that's enough for the most part.
Yeah. I feel like it's this. I mean, it's going to be helpful to see the charging documents, or maybe in Texas. I'm not. None of us are familiar with. Brad, you're probably more familiar than us with kind of standard of proof and intent in Texas. But I feel like the charging documents will show a little bit, because negligent homicide, or which to me is usually what manslaughter encapsulates, because usually you've got like depending on what state you're in, first degree murder or capital degree murder, which is that you are intending to kill somebody, you're thinking about it and doing it. Second degree murder, or which is a kind of spur of the moment thing, but still there's that intent, like I am going to kill somebody. This situation, like a negligent homicide, which is more of a manslaughter charges, usually, I mean, and I'm going back to my law school days, so forgive me, God, that's a long time ago. But it really is, something where total disregard for the safety and welfare of the people around you, and you're doing things that put people in such danger that it results in a homicide, and then you are then found guilty of a homicide, which then becomes manslaughter. To me, this would be much more akin to that, as opposed to a murder charge where you're thinking about an intent to actually kill somebody. And that's where I'm having trouble wrapping my head around a murder charge.
Yeah, and
Nope.
for the audience members to kind of understand the difference between manslaughter / negligent homicide. If you're driving a car and you get in a wreck and accidentally someone dies, that doesn't mean that you're going to be charged with murder. There could be civil issues and other things, but that happens. Now, if you're driving that same car and you're doing 90 in a school zone and you smash in another car, now we've taken it again to a different level, because now there could be negligence, or sometimes called manslaughter, depending on your state. So understand the difference between the two. So to your point, Alex, I'm providing a medical service and someone passed away. Did I do something that was negligent, versus I was providing medical service and I did it in such a way that I intended to kill them. So that's where, and again, I'm gonna lean on the criminal attorneys, and I'll probably stop talking about criminal, and we can move to other civil and medical board stuff later.
And all of this is contingent upon what the criminal attorneys say and what the documents say, because I don't want
to. I think what the problem is, why people are struggling with this, is because this was related to IV fluid at an IV fluid bar for the most part. And for many of us, while it is a medical procedure, you're infusing things into a patient's body. It's typically the things you would find in Gatorade, for that matter. And if you took it orally, you wouldn't think there would be a problem. But here, I don't know precisely what the cause of death was. I think the allegation is that there may have been either too much potassium, it was given too quickly and caused the heart to stop, and it may have interacted with other medications. The toxicology report said there were 2 other medications on board. I want to
if you
say,
talk to folks in the IV realm, like that, this what was given to her in light of her background should not have been given to her. From what I
okay. See, I know none of that. So all I understand is that it was electrolytes and vitamins, but it may very well be. I've also seen where they gave TPN. TPN is total parenteral nutrition,
I don't know
which
if
would
Brad, if you
be
know
high.
exactly what happened, because I know there was some information on that. I don't know if it's through the
I
grapevine.
can't remember the exact name of the drug. And again, where to your point, when I've had conversations with other physicians, they have told me that this particular medication is typically given in an emergency room situation when the patient's about to die or something of that sort. So again,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna
Well,
I'm gonna stay away from whether whether or not it's medically necessary or
My
needed.
interest is peaked now. I'd love to know the name of that medication. So that was given in the infusion by someone who is not licensed as a provider. Is that
Yes, this is a medical, in Texas, they call them medical assistants, but in reality, it's known as an unlicensed individual. At the time in Texas, a physician could delegate certain services to anyone so long as they believe the person had the proper supervision, delegation, and skill set to do whatever that services they were doing. To Alex's point, the law has changed in Texas now. IV therapy, if it is done, there's a whole bunch of rules, but one of which is only RNs or hires can deliver IV now in Texas. So that was a change in the law. So at the time, when he was delegating to this individual, the physician, it was not against the law. The question is whether or not it was good, sound medical decision making, and in this case, now criminal.
Brad? And the change in the law was related to this case, was it not?
Known as Jennifer Law because that was the name of the woman who passed away. And so that is correct. It's that death caused the shift. And there was other aspects that again that was alleged here that there was no proper supervision of the individual, and there was no what they call in the industry good faith examining. A physician or a nurse practitioner or PA cleared the patient to make sure they were a good candidate for the services. A lot of people who are familiar with this, again, I'm leaning on these medical individuals. They said, to Alex's point, yes, if a physician or a nurse practitioner or PA would listen to what this person had been taking prior, then they would not have prescribed that at all. And especially with the dosage. Again, I'm relying on medical individuals
Yeah,
who
and
are
this is what
further.
I've been hearing too. And then the other thing is, um, no no ability to handle cardiac arrest in the event that it happened. There was
Yeah,
no on-site medical treatment ability to resuscitate. Like there was really no medically trained personnel on site from what I can recall. So the person who was giving the IV was not medically trained at all. So there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems with it. And I think just by virtue of the fact that the patient died, I mean, that shows you all you need to know about whatever was given to her should not have been given to her.
yeah. And I'll
And
say this, Alex. I mean, I've been in this space for not as I haven't practiced medicine as long as Dr. Segal has, but I've been around doctors most of my life, and I know of orthopedic surgeons who were in there giving an injection to an individual in their office, like they do every single day, and the person ended up seizing up and dying in the office. So unfortunately, things like that happen. So going back to a person dying doesn't always mean that there was negligence or criminal acts. I think to maybe Jeff and I, who have been around this industry for a little bit longer than you have, Alex, by a good 5 minutes maybe, but it's really, really unusual to see the way it's come out across as a criminal complaint.
yeah. So here's like what happens with actually, I'm going to pause real quick. Brad, what's your time frame? How much do you have to jump?
I'm blocked all the way to 10:30.
Okay, all right. And Jeff, what about you?
Same.
Okay, all right, and back on. What is what is, if any, the involvement of the medical board in these types of decisions? Does the DA communicate with the medical board in a situation like this? Does the medical board immediately, obviously they know about what's going on. Is there any communication? Is there any coordination? And then I guess the next question after that, and Jeff, we'll start with you, and then Brad, you can chime in for Texas specifically. What is this an automatic suspension of license for this guy? I mean, who knows if he's been able to? I don't know if he's been able to bail himself out or not. Like what happens then? The thing that I'm also having trouble wrapping my head around is how we are here with him still practicing and
Well,
now he's been arrested.
we don't know if he's been practicing. We know that he has a limited license. So,
Well, that's true. He was still allowed to practice.
Yeah, I'll let Jeff answer that, but understand this for the audience is when someone is suspended, even and then they get their license back, if they have privileges at a hospital, let's say, the hospital could have their own investigation and determine whether or not they can still allow that person in. Commercial payers can then look at that and determine whether or not they still want to have this person on there as a person that can be reimbursed.
And we don't know any
So there's
of that, right?
other sidebars, which, that's not privileged to the public. That could be all being handled elsewhere, meaning this individual may still have a license, but nowhere to practice. So that's sidebarring whether or not, and I would love to hear Jeff's thoughts on the medical board, but I want to answer that to be clear.
Yep.
It's a total pile-on. So once you have this type of action, there may be independent investigations by the laundry list that Brad gave. So if you have a license in one state, but you have multiple licenses in other states, they'll all jump on board to do their own investigation. They may lean upon the initial investigation to come up with a temporary or permanent solution. If you need hospital privileges, they're going to do their own investigation. And just remember, a hospital is not going to be enthused about having somebody who's been criminally indicted or charged on their staff. Just imagine if they end up with just a problem. They're going to go, well, you knew about it. Why didn't you take any action? They'll say, well, we're just kind of waiting to see how this played out. And so there often is some type of negotiation behind the scenes with a licensing board to determine whether they're going to wait it out, whether the facts allow them to wait it out and allow this person to practice either in a full or limited capacity until the bitter end, or there may be a non-practice agreement. There may be something the attorney preemptively goes to a state licensing board and says, look, my doctor is willing to voluntarily step back for the moment as long as you don't make his life 20 times more difficult right now. He's trying to stay out of prison. That's his highest priority. And the biggest challenge for all of this is that the tactics and strategies for defending will vary. So in a criminal court, your attorney will tell you, say nothing, do not talk. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast for continuing legal education where a criminal defense attorney had a giant fish on his wall. His client says, why do you have a fish on the wall and you don't even fish? He says, I use it to make a point. If this fish had just kept his mouth shut, he'd still be alive today. The point being, in a criminal case, your attorney will generally tell you, look, there may be a time to take a stand, but more often than not, the state has to prove its case. They have to prove the case, so be silent. But in a medical licensed defense case, if you exercise your Fifth Amendment rights, broadly, because you've got a parallel criminal case, the board can take that as an inference of guilt. Yeah. They could take it as an inference of guilt. It's horrible.
I guess what I'm trying to get at. Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, let me jump in. And so, first off, for the audience, understand these are two completely different bodies. You have a criminal court that has, alleged that they did these wrongdoings. The medical board in almost every state is the independent board. It doesn't answer the criminal court. It's an administrative body that decides whether or not you can continue to use your license. The medical board could jump in well before this conviction happened. So as in this particular case, they did with that limited suspension that we talked about already. But they could always come back later and say, now that this has gone forward, we're going to conduct an emergency action, or we can just do a summary action because we're worried about, and they always fall back, and Jeff probably knows this better than me, but the risk to public welfare and the patient safety. That's their fallback.
I guess that's my point. This is what I'm struggling with. This is not a low profile case. This case has been in the news nationally for years, right? Legislatively, it's been all over. It was one of the biggest news stories last year. The medical board does an investigation, presumably. They have jurisdiction. They're acting on it. They do a limited suspension, right? He is not, whether he's practicing or not at the hospital, whether he has privileges or not, understood all that. He still is technically allowed to practice. So the medical board has done their investigation and made a decision based upon what they have found. Yet somehow the state, the DA, decides that what he did was actually chargeable with manslaughter and murder. And to me, that is a total disconnect between an interpretation of the facts and what happened. And so, yes, the medical board can come back and similarly do it post the fact, fine. But how is there such a difference of interpretation of facts where the medical board can say you can still practice even on a limited basis, where the state is saying you need to be charged with murder and potentially locked up for life?
Yeah, and so at least I'll address the medical board piece, and I'd love to hear Jeff's thought too. But the medical board's going to look at this individual as to, what do they normally do? What kind of complaints, if any, have ever been? What type of, he may have had people say he's a great anesthesiologist. He made a mistake of partnering with a buddy of his. Like, there may be language that the medical board got comfortable that, fine, you can continue as the anesthesiologist, but you clearly don't have a good take on being able to delegate to others. Again, we don't know what happened in those closed doors behind the medical board. Now, district attorneys, they're elected by the public, and they may they may be coming up on a particular, they may be up for re-election, and they may be seeing this as an opportunity to make sure everyone knows that they're out there trying to protect. Again, by the way, for audience members, I do not know any of the people involved in this, both either the prosecutors or and I don't even know this district attorney's up for re-election. But they can, and then on top of that, they have different investigators. So background, I did work 2 years in the DA's office. Not only do we have access to the detectives and the police officers, district attorney's offices have their own investigators, so they could be compiling more and additional information that they subpoenaed and requested. And the medical board doesn't even have that same capabilities to go that deep into it. And so that could be, again, what they're looking at, and they're finding maybe there's multiple times in which he knew this person didn't know what they were doing and he was correct. Like, again, and then they believe that was what was the criminal, like he knew that she couldn't be doing this stuff. I have no idea. I'm making this up, audience member. So again, these are all allegations, but they have that deeper pocket or deeper well of individuals to go further than your typical medical board investigator. So, but Jeff, I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Sorry.
There may be new facts. I mean, I think we are assuming, perhaps incorrectly, that they're working off a common set of facts, meaning that the board did its total investigation. You can come up with the same argument related to Dr. Death. The board did its own investigation related to Dr. Death, and I don't know if they fully exonerated him, but certainly went back to practice. And that was part of the frustration, that there was a trail of bodies, people were injured, yet he was still allowed to practice. But the criminal justice system took a different tack. Maybe they needed to be a bit more creative, but we're assuming we've got the same set of facts here, and I'm not sure that's 100%. We don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And I'm not trying to pile on the medical board here. It's just, I know that one of the things we've been dealing with as an industry is enforcement. Like, how do you enforce? Like, who has the ability to enforce? And there's been a frustration, I know, we just come back from medical spa show, and there's been a frustration that in some ways it seems to be falling upon the criminal law and criminal jurisprudence to enforce some of the some of the medical spa like laws, and that just doesn't seem that doesn't seem right. In a case like this, when it does seem very, very, everything seems pretty well laid out. Like Brad, when we were talking about it earlier, it's like good faith exam, supervision, delegation, all of those things are fairly clear, to the point where somebody died and you're talking about criminal charges. It's like, it seems to me we shouldn't have to wait for a murder or manslaughter charge to be able to really address this. And that's kind of the point I'm getting at.
Yeah. I think, we've talked about this a number of times, and the biggest problem I think a lot of people face is they hear this is a cash-based business. It's lesser. There's gray areas. There's a lot of like people who make you feel comfortable that it's okay if I don't have a doctor on site, or it's okay that I don't have proper medical training. And that's not always the case. And in some states, again, at the time in Texas, this physician could delegate to whoever they wanted. But that was one element of three that they should have been thinking about. Again, that maybe there was a good faith exam, we're just not aware of it, or maybe he did know that this person could render these services. So again, there's all these other factors. But if I was going to go back in time and an individual called me up and says, I want to open an IV bar in Texas, I would have walked them through each parallel to make sure, have you addressed this issue, and this issue? And at least at the very beginning, they would at least know where they are. That doesn't mean bad things can't happen. I mean, we obviously, every person is different and they'll react differently to a Botox or a filler that you've done a number of times. I know of a case right now where this doctor has been prescribing the same thing, the same patient for a long time, and then this patient had a exact same dosage, had a really bad reaction to it. So again, like emergency reaction, but that stuff like that happens in the practice of medicine. But what do you fall back on? Well, in this case, do you have good SOPs? Do you have good people? In this case, they had great SOPs. They had a physician on site and was able to figure out what was happening and get the patient stabilized to get them over to the emergency room. Like there are just certain things that you need to remember, that this is the practice of medicine. And because of that, you need to fall back on that and not fall into the retail side of it, which is not thinking about just, hey, I'm going to have a patient come in and I'm going to just get paid cash. So that would be like where I would fall back on any of these situations, which then protect you, hopefully, from any criminal and, more importantly, medical board and criminal implications.
I mean, I'm a fan of if you have a business idea, get it vetted by an attorney up front when everybody's happy, as opposed to trying to clean up after the fact. There's a temptation to believe this is retail, but even gyms, the gym that I go to has a defibrillator sitting on the wall. On the airplanes where there may not be a single doctor on board, there's still a doctor bag on board with a defibrillator. I mean, these things are omnipresent, trying to anticipate what are the worst case scenarios that are out there and preempt them. But if you've not given it any thought and just believe that it's not dissimilar to a restaurant, and there is a problem, these are medical procedures. They're called medical spas for a reason. They're medical procedures. And it's easy to get lulled into complacency, believing that it's not any different than getting, your hair cut.
Yeah. And I agree. And the other piece, Alex, that we've seen in this industry is the herd mentality. Well, that's how everyone does it. And I know that I'm going to take some words that you've said multiple times, but like the herd mentality needs a shift. Everyone needs to do it the compliant way.
Right.
Or what you hashtag compliance is cool, or we say embrace compliance. Either way, like that's where the herd needs to go, not the opposite, which is the easy retail part. And some of these people are coming from spas, are coming from just pure business backgrounds. I mean, gym owners who are coming in the space. And so to Jeff's point, which I completely agree, hit the pause button. Remember, you're stepping into the medical industry. What are the things that you need to do differently from your other business to be compliant? Which again, typically we're looking at it from a medical board, nursing board, investigation side, now pharmaceutical board, but not criminal charges.
Yeah. Interesting. I gotta say, it's I'm very, very, very interested to see how this plays out. I do, Jeff, you mentioned before we jumped on, and I think you're right. There does seem to be a little bit of an uptick in criminal activity related to medical treatment, especially in this industry. We just saw there was an arrest in Arizona just the other day for unauthorized practice. There was, I feel like maybe this is the beginning of more of this. But I'm very, very curious to see how this plays out. I'm also, Brad, to your point, I'm a little curious as to what other factors were involved in this charge, as opposed to just, the facts. I think there may be some posturing going on from wanting to charge it with murder to make a statement, and then who knows where this will end up. Ultimately, a lot of these cases get pled down, and where this will end up in a year from now may be very different than where we are right now. But anything else? I'm curious. Any other thoughts y'all have?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add in this one, which we've seen in Miami before, for the where there was an arrest. So so in this particular case, remember, we had the physician who was involved in the care, and then we had the owner of an entity who was also involved in the care. They were arrested. We've seen situations like in Miami where you had a person who's an unlicensed individual rendering medical services at a clinic, and then there was an operator, or sorry, an owner of that medical clinic, and an administrator, and all three were arrested because they weren't doing anything properly. There was the one provider that was clearing patients was a physician who was licensed in another country, never licensed in the United States. The one person providing the injections, again, the owner had nothing to do with the day-to-day medical services, but they arrested her too because she was the owner of the place that was providing the unauthorized practice medicine. So understand that, like, there are ways in which, even as an owner, even if you're not in the front line touching patients, that you also can get in trouble from that perspective too.
And it's complaint driven. So if somebody is injured, the patient can and will complain. If somebody dies, the family can and will complain. But it's not only that. If you're making a lot of money and very visible, and you're not doing it properly, your competitors can and will complain. Meaning you can be getting great results, but if you're not doing it properly, you can well imagine people complaining and saying you're a potential danger to the public. Nobody's been injured yet, thank God, but we're just one injection away from a trail of tears here.
Yeah, and to Jeff's point, when we get pulled into board investigations, eventually we'll come out, and it's always an angry person who's reporting you, an angry patient, an angry former employee, or an angry competitor, generally the top three that we.
An ex-spouse too.
And I'm about to say, sometimes it's baby daddy, baby mama, ex-spouse. But yes, those happen too. And to Jeff's point is, if you're buttoned up and compliant, that complaint, although painful, will eventually go away. If you're non-compliant, now you have the board investigation, and then typically when someone passes away like this, or they're damaged or harmed, there's also civil exposure. That's typically where your malpractice insurance would kick in. Something like this, you have to be very clear, is that when criminal comes in play, generally speaking, there is not an insurance policy that's going to cover you for criminal acts, unless, I've never heard of one, unless Jeff knows something, but Jeff seems to
No, I think what's interesting is that insurance generally does not cover intentional acts. There may be some that exist, but I don't think they do.
Claim in this case that was filed, from what I know. The other thing is, isn't this a pretty clear case of unauthorized practice of medicine, or aiding and abetting unauthorized practice of medicine? Why aren't the laws that we're always like Brad at boot camps?
Well, I believe they were arrested for that, Alex.
Were they?
I believe that's, at least again, we haven't seen the complaint, but all we have so far, audience members so far, that I have seen, was lots of different news reports out there as it relates to what the arrest was, and I believe those were two of the charges. Unauthorized practice of medicine was one. So again, I'm sorry we have not seen the complaints. It makes it real difficult. So hopefully when you have the criminal attorney on.
We've tried to find them. It's it's a little more challenging because it's in a rural community, so it's not, everything is not posted online immediately. So
on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, we'll get it eventually, and all this stuff will come out. It's just so obviously a lot of speculation here. None of us.
Just send your news team down there. Just send your news team down there to knock on the door.
We will get it.
Yeah,
you can get it. It's all
more attend.
Yeah, that too. Jeff, anything else that comes to mind about this whole thing that you want to touch on?
And generally, the way I try, there are clients who have what I call the trifecta. They've got a civil complaint where they're being sued. They have an administrative complaint where their license is at risk, and they have criminal complaints. If you're being sued, you often have insurance to cover it. So while an unhappy experience, it's not fatal to your career or to your freedom. If you lose your license, you're still free in theory, but you may not be able to earn a living. And if you lose criminally, your freedom is at risk. So I think you need to sequence it properly or prioritize it properly. Only criminal case is the most severe, the one that is the one that's most worrisome. And sometimes you may find you have to give up your license just to stay out of prison. Okay. But ultimately, I think if you ask 100 people, 99 will tell you that you can always make more money. You can probably find another job, but staying out of prison is probably the highest.
Yeah, I agree. And Alex, one of the things I was thinking about is when big events like this typically happen over the my lifetime, when I've seen things like that, that typically is a great moment for anyone who's out there with their own medical facility. Hit a pause button and not only look and go, oh my gosh, that's horrible, but internally start questioning everything they are doing themselves. Don't say, well, they must have been doing something really bad. This is a great time to do what we call, internally do a practice assessment. Do you have the right protocols? Do you have the right people? Are you clearing the patients properly? Like, stop and hit the pause button, because if an event like that happens at your med spa, and not saying someone dies or someone's harmed, but Jeff said this early on, there's a reputational factor that comes with that. Well, all of a sudden the news cameras are out front, and you want to be the one saying, yes, it is awful that happened. It's very unusual that happened. This is our process. Like, there are ways in which you can better protect yourself, but understand this is a golden opportunity for everyone out there to really rethink what are they doing, how are they doing, and where do they need to tighten their practice.
Yeah. And it's, hopefully this will draw more attention within our industry to folks so they can start doing that. I think that's obviously something that we are preaching and we want to know. The other thing is just reputationally, this hurts the industry nationwide. I mean, this was on Law and Crime, the website. I mean, this is not going to be, this will be picked up and talked about. So there'll be other shoes to drop. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Any predictions? Anybody want to make a prediction?
Well, I was at a week ago. I was at the Federation of State Medical Board meeting. That's the umbrella organization for all of the licensing bodies, and this was topic A. There was a session on emerging issues, medical spas and psychedelic treatments. That was one session, and they had someone from Georgia talking about new legislation they had passed, and both of them talked about the Texas case, the Texas law. And in fact, one of them came on stage and said, news just in, indictment, or there were criminal charges filed. So it is on their radar how to manage it. And part of the frustration for the medical boards is that they have jurisdiction over doctors or physicians. They don't have jurisdiction over other licensed professionals, so I need to coordinate with them. The nursing board has its own board. Some states have composite boards, makes it a little bit easier to cross over. But they did express frustration. They believe that the industry has jumped ahead of their ability to regulate it properly. They also believe that these are medical procedures. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity, Alex, to say you're on their side in one way in terms of making it compliant. And I'm sure they would welcome your perspective there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great idea.
And yours too, Brad.
I would say this, Alex, I mean, to your question, I guess you're trying to ask, are they likely to succeed, or what do we think? I mean, obviously there's so many unknowns right now. But my question I'm trying to figure out, are they trying to succeed, or they're trying to make a statement, right? Like, what's really happening here? Now, let's think about what's already happened since then. Again, there was this place has been shut down, so it can't be out there harming other people. The state of Texas has done some statutory changes to hopefully prevent anything like this happening again, where you have the right people with the right rules, and again, emergency procedure and training, all that stuff is kind of put in place. And again, we talked about criminal intent earlier. I mean, who knows what truly, as Jeff did say, that there could be additional facts we're not aware of, and that may be what they're relying on. But ultimately, this is a statement, and we've definitely seen situations where other states start looking into it. It wouldn't surprise me if other states start tightening their IV laws. We've seen that already happen with other industries when they moved around on compounding. So again, I agree with what you said at the very, I guess, end of this, was like, this is a great opportunity for everyone to really rethink and make themselves more compliant, so we don't have other hit pieces on the industry.
Yeah, just do it right.
Yep, that's right. That's right. All right. Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate this. It was super interesting. We will be covering this. I know you'll be looking at it too. And when something comes up, we'll get you back and get your opinion on that as well. Appreciate your views and assessment on all this.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you to our producer, Madeline Moeller, Marketing Content Coordinator, who organizes the podcast schedule and guests and provides topics and talking points. Audio and video editing, voiceover, graphics, and platform management is provided by myself, Derek Hawk, Digital Marketing Supervisor. Our themes are provided by Maka Music. Thank you for watching or listening to the Medical Spa Insider podcast. Please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future episodes. Ratings and reviews are greatly appreciated. For more information about the American Med Spa Association, visit americanmedspa.org. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by AmSpa. Views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance in the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. AmSpa provides this podcast as a full service for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues. And as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Spa Insider. Remember, compliance is cool.